What is the weirdest, creepiest, unexplained thing you've ever encountered? When I was about 8, I woke up at my grandparents' house to my cousin saying, "Wake up, let's play hide and go seek." I looked around, couldn't find her. She said, "Don't quit, come and find me." I searched high and low. She spoke to me in all different parts of the house. Finally I burst into my parents' room and said, "Is Ellen hiding in here?" And they said, "She isn't coming until tomorrow." My husband and I had a cool portrait painted of a friend who passed away. One night we were talking about him and our dog, who was sound asleep, got up, went over to the painting and started barking at it. Our dog did this to a painting we had once. Turns out there were a lot of centipedes living inside the frame. It was as much of a nightmare as you are probably imagining. When we discovered them, seeing all the supernatural replies on here. Maybe mine doesn't fit, but oh well. I lived in a shady neighborhood for about 10 years. One day at like 3 PM, I was out walking my dog. A guy came up to me in a rush. There was a huge bulge under his shirt. It was moving around, and his shirt was soaking wet. It was a white shirt. No blood. Just wet. He asked me, "Do you know where the native center is?" There was nothing like that anywhere near us. And I told him so. He turned and ran, holding the animal comma in his shirt, yelling "Shi-I-I-I-I-I-I-I-I-I-I." He turned a corner and he was gone. It wasn't scary, but it was definitely unexplained. One night, I was laying on my bed with a window open, and it was around 2 AM. On the road outside, I heard an ice cream truck go by, with its music and everything. Then a couple seconds after that, I heard a police car drive by in the same direction with its sirens going off. I'll never know what illegal activity someone was doing with an ice cream truck at 2 in the morning. Edit, typo. As a teenager, my parents moved into another house because our previous one caught fire. One morning I woke up smelling breakfast. I'm like, hell yeah, mom's cooking pancakes, bacon and eggs. I mean, the smell was right on the money. My brother and I get up to see no one cooking and my mom asleep. Okay, whatever. Tell my mom about it later and she looks crazy shocked. Sad the landlord told her jokingly about it being haunted by an old lady that cooks breakfast sometimes. She never told us until then. Only time it ever happened. My one nipple is constantly itchy. Doctors can't explain it. The internet can't explain it. I'm just doomed to scratch my right nipple for eternity. One time I was in my backyard playing with a plastic toy dinosaur. Loved that thing. I tossed it up into the sky, and then it never fell back down. I never saw it again. One night, during college, I woke at about 2:30 AM. I can't explain why, but I immediately jumped out of bed and started getting dressed. I was completely dressed and just starting to wonder what I was doing when the phone rang. It was one of my best friends. She said she had tried acid at a party earlier and was on a bad trip. She was terrified of everything and had been hiding under a table for about half an hour, trying to get to the phone to call me. Somehow, I knew and was getting ready to go get her before she even called for help. I still don't know how to explain that. It's almost midnight. I shouldn't have come here. I can't tell you how many times I've made the mistake of reading these creepiest threads before bed and then I get too scared to sleep, so I end up being awake super late with nothing to do but read more people's creepiest stories. One time I was running early in the morning before high school. It was 6 AM-ish and still dark out as it was the late fall. I lived in a town in Ohio with one side surrounded by trees. As I'm coming up an uphill curvy road in my community, I notice what has been placed on the guardrail. There were about 10 raggedy children's stuffed animals stapled to the posts. I was running before, but I was sprinting away after that. I told my father, who was on city council, about it and he talked to the Parks and Rec employees. Apparently they take them down and someone puts new ones back up every week. In a pretty sleepy town, this was a really freaking weird thing to see. Edit, no chick died there during that time, or in the 10 years prior to when I saw them. This town is very small, I definitely would have heard about that. I'm gonna talk to some of my friends this weekend and see if they know of any other reason for a memorial. A few years ago, I was at home with my parents and sister. My sister and I were sitting on the couch in the living room, facing the kitchen, and my parents were in the TV room, to the left of the kitchen. My sister and I heard a noise in the kitchen, but shrugged it off. My mom approached us and asked if we'd heard that noise. We instantly felt a sense of dread and said yes. In that instant, all three of us saw a black shadow float at the top of the entryway of the kitchen, then disappear. I walked over to the kitchen, peeked in, and saw that every cabinet was wide open. I hated that house after that. When I was little, our house had an upstairs apartment that my grandfather lived in. My grandfather would sit in the front window smoking, drinking coffee and just watching the neighborhood. He was very sick from cancer and died in our house. A few months later, a new family moved into the house across the street from us. The wife and my mom became friends. One day the lady across the street asked my mom who the old guy was that lived upstairs and would sit in the window smoking and drinking coffee. No one had moved in upstairs. I was in the bathroom at Subway. In the garbage can beside the toilet I saw a cooked hot dog on top of an open package of uncooked hot dogs, the one missing being the cooked one. To this day I want to know what happened. I once went to Disney World when I was about 10 or 11. When I came out of the Haunted Mansion ride, there were lipstick kiss marks all over my face. I did not feel anything during it and I was riding with my little brother, who was not wearing lipstick. Still freaks me out to this day. I was in a brand new apartment that had white carpet. This was before I moved anything in, so the apartment was completely empty. I had to replace a light bulb, so I was standing on a stepladder, unscrewing the glass dome with a large black and yellow screwdriver when the screwdriver slipped out of my hands. I felt sore, it hit my elbow. Then I turned my head away so it wouldn't hit me in the eyes. Didn't feel anything, so I figured it must have bounced away from my body after hitting my elbow. But I never heard it hit the floor. So, again, this is in a completely empty apartment, with white carpet floors, and I just dropped a black screwdriver. Except I never once heard the screwdriver hit the floor, and it just went missing. I never did find that screwdriver. When I was a dumb young kid, I was on the phone with a friend late at night and some guy called up and said he was with the phone company and they were doing work on my block. He described my block perfectly and said he wanted to verify my address. I probably should have said you guys should know that already, but again, dumb young kid. I continued talking to my friend and started to regret giving this stranger any info. He called back maybe 20 minutes later and said, "Matt, are you scared yet? Never found out who that was, how they knew my name, and why they were messing with me." When I was about 8 years old, I fell asleep and had what I can only relate as a 90 Toys commercial on an bad acid trip. It was a close-up of a snarling Doberman that was covered in neon colors, and in a second it had bit me on my arm. I jerked awake and my arm was in extreme pain. I looked at my arm and I was bleeding and what appeared to be bite mark in my arm that could have only happened if I was holding my arm in a defensive position defending myself from something. The bite mark had elongated canines and was bleeding. We never did or ever would own a dog. My dad also told me a story that always creeped him out. Shortly after I just started to walk, my dad woke up one morning, and he came to get me out of my crib. When he got there, I was nowhere to be seen. He went downstairs to see if maybe somehow I was down there. Nope. He looked around until he finally noticed the front door and screen door were both unlocked and wide open, deadbolts and all. He feared the worst. So he ran outside and found me in the bed of his Ford F-250 truck bawling my eyes out. Edit. Thanks to you Azav for the correction. One time when I was on a 15-hour drive I had to pull over at a rest stop to get some sleep. I quickly passed out and had the strangest dream of people trying to kill me at a rest stop. When I woke up from the dream, there was a smiley face on the inside of my windshield. Needless to say, I hauled it the second I woke up. This actually has a pretty reasonable explanation. You've had a passenger sitting there before, maybe several days or weeks ago, who got bored and drew a smiley on the window. When you went to sleep that night, the windows started fogging up again and the smiley got visible. This is why my dad always got mad if my sister and I drew on the windows. When I was about 12, my mother's friend asked her and her other church friends to visit his house to pray over it. Ever since he had moved in, he had seen dark shapes, smelled bad things, experienced cold spots, heard voices, and his wife had been acting weird. My mother took me with her because, I presume, I had nowhere else to go. Whoever had lived in the house before had drawn weird symbols in the garage, such as the all-seeing eye, and the whole place just had a very uncomfortable presence. This man had never stepped foot in his storm cellar. This is Oklahoma, so it's separate from the house, and the shelter just had an evil feeling emanating from it. They all decided to open it, not thinking there would be anything there. When they opened it, there were dozens of dried up dead cats and chickens that apparently had been sacrificed. This is in the city, so no real reason to have chickens down there. It was just a terrible, evil feeling.